Imagine you're sitting in a dim room somewhere in Eastern Europe, scrolling through war footage like it's just another Tuesday. Then suddenly, you stumble on a tiny detail, one that most people would miss, and it hits you. Ukraine didn't just attack a dam. They outsmarted an entire air defense network using cheap drones, a retro jet, and a psychological mind game. This wasn't about firepower. It wasn't about who had better gear. This was a trap, a deliberate, slow-cooked setup designed to make a superpower panic. And once you understand what actually happened here, you'll never look at modern warfare the same way again. To really get why Ukraine pulled off such a risky stunt, you have to zoom out a bit. This dam wasn't just a piece of concrete blocking water. It was the backbone of Russia's entire supply system in that region. Think of it like a pressure valve. If it stays intact, Russian logistics keep flowing smoothly. But if it breaks, the entire front line collapses like a Jenga tower. Ukraine didn't attack it for drama. They attacked it because every gallon of water behind that gate was basically holding up Russian troops, fuel, ammo, and transportation routes. And here's the crazy part. Russia didn't treat it like the strategic linchpin it was. They patched it with steel plates on a military-critical dam in the middle of an active war zone. To Ukraine, that was basically an invitation. So this wasn't just a military strike. It was a message. If you ignore your weak spots, we'll exploit them. The motive was simple. Break the dam, choke Russian supply, turn the entire sector into chaos. But wanting to hit the dam and actually hitting it were two totally different things, because the real problem wasn't the target. It was the defenses guarding it. People love to talk about Western weapons like they're magic, but what nobody tells you is that Ukraine had no aircraft that could actually use those weapons properly. The MiG-29 is a Cold War museum piece, loud, bright, and about as stealthy as a marching band. Pair that with a Russian air defense system that can spot a baseball from absurd distances, and the equation looks impossible. If the MiG flew high, Russian radar would see it instantly. If it flew low, their optical sensors would catch it. If it went straight at the dam, the Panzer S-1 would swat it out of the sky like a mosquito. And to make things worse, the JDAM-ER bombs, the ones Ukraine needed for long-range precision, were never designed for Soviet-era jets. It's like trying to Bluetooth a modern phone to a cassette player. The tech just does not match. But here's where Ukrainian engineers shine. Instead of saying we can't, they rewired, reattached, and reimagined the entire weapon platform. They built a custom pylon adapter that allowed an old jet to talk to a modern bomb, something even American engineers weren't sure was practical. This mission wasn't powered by expensive tech, it was powered by improvisation. But even with those bombs attached, there was still one massive issue. How do you get that MiG close enough without getting vaporized? That's where the deception begins. Most people think this mission was about flying a jet and dropping bombs. But the truth? The MiG was just the final chess piece. The real attack happened 20 minutes before the plane even appeared on radar. Ukraine used something called reverse echo, which sounds like a sci-fi gadget, but it's actually a brilliantly simple mind game. Instead of using drones to attack, they used drones to lie. These tiny plastic birds carried radar reflectors, little devices that make them look like fighter jets. Think of it like walking into a room full of security cameras holding up a giant mirror. The cameras don't know what's real anymore. They just see something big moving fast. That's what these drones did to the Russian radar operators. Suddenly, 15 to 20 fighters showed up on screens, all coming from the wrong direction. To a radar operator, that's a nightmare scenario. Your brain goes into overdrive. Your training says attack immediately. And just like that, Russia emptied its missile tubes on $400 toys. This is what makes reverse echo so genius. It forces the enemy to react emotionally, not logically. It drains ammo before the real threat appears. And worst of all for Russia, the drones looked like pilots trying to survive, so the human behind the radar panicked. Ukraine didn't outgun Russia, they misled them. While the defenses were locked onto ghosts and scrambling to counter fake threats, the real MiG was quietly slipping through the cracks. Low, silent, unseen. The trap was already closed, and Russia didn't even realize they were inside it. Here's the part almost everyone misses. Russia didn't lose because their systems were weak. They lost because because their systems did exactly what they were designed to do, just at the wrong moment against the wrong targets. They're excellent at reacting, but terrible at questioning. Their operators saw drones, attacked drones. They saw radar signatures, assumed authenticity. They saw explosions, assumed success. Not once did they stop and ask, why would Ukraine send 20 aircraft into the same kill zone at the same time? Because when you rely on expensive systems, you start trusting the system more than your own critical thinking. Ukraine exploited that dependency. This operation showed 3 big truths about modern warfare. 1. Cheap beats expensive when used creatively. A $400 drone can force a $150,000 missile to launch. A swarm of plastic hobby aircraft can drain a multi-million-dollar battery. A radar reflector can mimic a fighter jet well enough to spark panic. This isn't just cost-effective, it's psychologically devastating to the enemy. 2. Human error is the biggest weakness in advanced systems. Every defense network, no matter how automated, has one human sitting at a console making judgment calls. And humans, under pressure, don't think logically. They think emotionally, reactively, sometimes desperately. Ukraine weaponized that panic, and it worked beautifully. And 3. The future of war is deception, not firepower. This operation wasn't a demonstration of strength. It was a demonstration of misdirection. Reverse Echo isn't about drones, it's about forcing the enemy to fight a battle that doesn't exist. And once they commit to the fake battlefield, the real battlefield is already decided. What stood out to me most is how this mission signals a shift in the war overall. Russia is fighting with the idea that more equipment equals more control, but Ukraine is fighting with the idea that better thinking equals better outcomes. And when those two philosophies collide, the smarter strategy always wins. This wasn't a victory of air power. This was a victory of timing, psychology, improvisation, and patience. A 40-year-old jet, a handful of cheap drones, a pilot with nerves of steel, and a plan built on tricking the enemy to defeat themselves. Sometimes the most dangerous weapon isn't a bomb. It's an idea the enemy didn't prepare for. Once those fake fighter jets showed up on radar, everything spiraled instantly. The first wave of drones triggered pure chaos. Russian operators saw dozens of high-speed signatures, all looking like real threats, all moving like real aircraft. And remember, radar operators aren't robots. They're human beings sitting in a dark truck, staring at screens, trying not to make the wrong call. But the psychological trap had already snapped shut. The first drones forced the Panzer to start firing. The cannons heated up. Missiles launched in blind panic. Radar screens flooded with noise. Operators stopped analyzing and started reacting. This is the real weakness of advanced air defense systems. They rely on humans making perfect decisions under impossible pressure. By the time the second drone wave arrived, moving faster and smarter, Russia was already mentally defeated. Turrets were facing the wrong way. Ammunition was nearly gone. The targeting computer was drowning in junk signals. Every burst of cannon fire sounded like another emergency. And the irony? Russia thought they were winning. Every drone shot down felt like a victory, but every drone destroyed was another minute bought for the MiG, another piece of the trap falling into place. This wasn't electronic warfare. This wasn't brute force. This was psychological manipulation dressed up as an air raid. Once the Russian defenses were blind, deaf, and overheated, the real player finally entered the board. The MiG had been crawling along the terrain like a shark underwater, waiting for the noise above to cover its presence. Only when every drone died, every missile was gone, and the Panzer was spinning in circles, did the pilot make his move. Think about what that must feel like. Your cockpit lights flashing, warning tones screaming, and you know you have 3 seconds to choose between your life and the mission. The loft bombing maneuver isn't glamorous. It's basically throwing a bomb like a baseball, letting physics, altitude, and GPS do the rest. The JDAMP ER's pop-out wings give it range, but that range only works if the pilot climbs at the perfect moment. Too early, bomb falls short. Too late, missile hits you before release. He climbs anyway. That's the part that always sticks with me. War isn't just technology and strategy. It's one human being trusting math more than fear. He pulls up, releases the bombs, snaps the jet inverted, dodges a Mach 3 missile by the width of a car door, and drops back into the valley like he was never there. Most people watching the footage only see a jet flashing across the sky. But what they don't realize is that everything, every drone, every radar echo, every chaotic moment was designed to give that one moment enough oxygen to exist. And once those bombs were in the air, the mission was already over. Here's here's where the story flips from dramatic to strategic. Everyone sees the explosion. Everyone sees the water burst through. But almost nobody understands what this actually did to the battlefield. This wasn't about flooding. This was about erasing an entire command ecosystem. When that steel gate blew out, the force of the water didn't just damage the dam. It ripped into everything downstream. The $150 million command hub, the secure communication servers, the armored vehicles parked nearby, the transport routes, the railway supply line, and most importantly, the ammo distribution network. In less than a minute, Russia didn't just lose infrastructure, they lost coordination, they lost supply, they lost tempo. That's the part I think most people underestimate. A military without supply isn't a military, it's just a group of people holding rifles. By knocking out that dam, Ukraine effectively unplugged thousands of Russian troops. Their ammunition chain dried up, their heavy vehicles bogged down, their command structure went quiet, and all of that happened because a few drones and one old jet teamed up to manipulate a defense system worth more than small countries. This wasn't a strike, this was a message. If you build a fortress, but you don't question your blind spots, someone else will. If there's one takeaway from this entire mission, it's this: the side with the biggest machines doesn't win the war. The side with the smartest ideas does. Russia entered this conflict with armored convoys, a massive air defense network, and enough missiles to level small cities. On paper, this dam shouldn't have been untouchable. A MiG-29 shouldn't be able to get within 40 miles of it without turning into scrap metal. But war doesn't happen on paper. War happens inside the minds of the people pulling the triggers. And this mission exposed something Russia probably didn't want anyone to notice.